vBrownbag. I'm your host, Trevor Roberts, and tonight we have Mike Preston presenting to us on VMware vCenter Orchestrator, or VCO as it's commonly known. So before we get into the actual content, a couple of things to keep in mind. We have the conversation going on Twitter. You can follow the @vBrownbag and the various other Twitter accounts, as well as post using the vBrownbag hashtag, so we can keep the conversation going with folks who are online who may not be able to join us live. Want to give a reminder for all of the various international vBrownbags that we have. Asia Pacific, every other Thursday, 9 p.m. New Zealand Standard Time. EMEA, Tuesday, 7 p.m., whatever that time zone is. And then Latin America, Thursdays at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Of course, you're here for the U.S. one on Wednesday evenings. And we have the OpenStack meeting that goes on every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Central, and it's actually resuming next week. So again, our guest is Mike Preston, and without any further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to him. Okay, we're having some technical difficulties with turning over the presenter duties. 1 second. Okay, Mike, you should have control.
Alrighty. Everybody can hear me fine?
Yeah.
Can see my screen? All right, perfect.
See it perfectly.
Excellent. All right. First off, thanks for having me tonight. I've been a long time sort of attendee of the vBrownbags, and I've dished out my fair share of banter during the presentations, so I guess it's my turn to finally take some. So with that, I'll just get started and just kind of tell you a little bit about myself. I work as a systems analyst at a school board here in Ontario, Canada. Basically, that means we do pretty much everything. vSphere is not the only thing I do. I do a lot of development, database development, web applications, things like that, and a lot of just general sysadmin stuff. My VCP 4 and 5 I've attained, and as of January 3rd, I've got my DCA. So, and that's a big thanks to you, to the vBrownbag crew as well, because without all that content you guys have put out, it would have been hard to. It certainly helped a lot with my DCA studies. I blog. I have a blog at blog.mwpreston.net, and I'm the co-leader of the Toronto VMUG with Angelo Luciani and Eric Wright, who is Disco Posse on Twitter. So, got a pretty solid group of leadership people up here in Toronto for the VMUG. One disclaimer there, I'm not a VCO expert by any means. This presentation and a couple of the VMUG ones I've done are really based around a series of blog posts I did called my First Vco Workflow. So right now I might be on my 5th or 6th VCO workflow, so I'm pretty much a novice when it comes to vCenter Orchestrator. But I was just going to share with you a few tips and tricks I've learned along the way in creating some workflows and running some PowerCLI scripts with them. Just to graphically represent my level of knowledge with VCO on the Atwell automation scale of excellence, I'm about 2 Atwells. So obviously my goal is to get up there to the top of the Atwell pyramid, but that's going to take some time. A little bit about what I'm going to go over. I only have like 5 slides here, but just a little bit about what I'm going to go over. Your last vBrownbag talked about the different installation options for vCenter Orchestrator, and I'm going to take the VCO appliance and just get it basically configured and integrated within the vSphere web client, and just show everyone how to do that. as well as we'll do a PowerShell plugin installation and deploy some workflows to run some PowerShell scripts and execute them from within the vSphere web client. So with that, we can get started, eh? I assume no one has any questions about those slides.
No questions so far.
Perfect. Alrighty.
And Mike, do you prefer that people ask questions throughout the thing or towards the end? What's your preference?
Oh, just whenever. Just
okay.
Doesn't really matter. Yeah. Yeah, just whenever they want, just via Twitter or however they're gonna get them through. So basically, this is the Orchestrator appliance, and look at that, my session expired. So this is the configuration interface of VCO, and the only thing I've done to the appliance is basically set a static IP and change the default root password, which is the password you use here as well, and the default username is VMware. I've not found a way to be able to log in as any other user other than VMware to the Orchestrator configuration page. So essentially, the first thing we need to do in configuring this is on our network tab here, and you can see sort of the green and red little circles and triangles that indicate to us, whether things are set up properly or not. Right from the get-go, most of the stuff in the appliance is set up fine. In order to get it integrated and talking to SSO and seen by the vSphere web client, though, there is a little bit of work to do. The first thing is simply selecting which IP address that VCO is going to listen on. This is a step I commonly miss. If you don't do this, it won't work for you. So simply just select the drop-down, select that IP, apply changes, and you're good to go. Secondly, over on the SSL tab, we need to import a couple of certs from our vCenter server and our SSO server. So the first one we're going to have to import is just our standard web services cert from our vCenter server, and that's done just by typing the FQDN of your vCenter server :443. Just hit import and import again down here. The second cert that we need to import is our SSO cert. So my SSO instance is installed on my vCenter server, so it's the same URL, but if you have installed a separate instance of SSO somewhere, you'll have to use that FQDN. But it's just :7444, and again, import, and import again. So that's it for the certification imports, or for the cert imports. You need to do this, otherwise things aren't going to work. So certainly make sure you get that done. We'll just keep moving down, I guess. Authentication, if it comes up. This is where we will basically change it from using its default instance of OpenLDAP that's on the appliance to SSO. And again, that's going to be the web address of your SSO and the administrator password for that default domain that installs with SSO. So for 5.1, I think it was system-domain. 5.5, it's vSphere.local. So hopefully you remember that password that you used when you first installed SSO. So we'll go ahead and register Orchestrator with single sign-on. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow VCO and vCenter to, exchange tokens via the SSO instance. So after we do that, if you scroll down, we need to select, a domain or a group, for our VCO admins, and you'll see basically all the domains or all the groups that your SSO instance sees. So I see, my local groups on my vCenter server, the domain groups from my AutoLab instance, and the vSphere.local groups that are there with that. This is really just, who's going to be able to administer VCO, so who can install plugins and different things like that. So we can go ahead and accept that configuration. Yeah, sorry?
Yeah, I had one thing I wanted you to highlight possibly is the importance of NTP when working with SSO and VCO, because things can kind of go off the rails as far as certificates and authentication and all that, at least in my experience.
Yeah, for sure. You're going to want to make sure that both your whatever server you have SSO on is pointing to an NTP server as well as VCO. I don't know if there's a way to do it right in here if it's all command line.
Yeah,
I've never seen it in here anyways. Yeah, we can have a look after and see if we can find it. But over here we can just simply, test the authentication to see if what we did was right. Yeah, certainly if anyone has any comments or anything, like I said, I'm only 2 Atwells on that scale of excellence, so I definitely can use anything anyone else has to say as well. So I'll just go ahead and try a domain account and just make sure that it's working. Which it is. The next section down here is your database. I'm just using the integrated Postgres DB that comes with the appliance, but here's where you can attach it, to an external SQL server, an external Oracle server, and you'll probably want to do that if you're running in production, especially if you're going to use some of the high availability that comes with VCO 5.5 and the fault tolerance stuff. I think it's a requirement actually if you're going to use that. But I mean, for these purposes, for this lab, I'm just using the stuff that comes with it. The next thing we need to do then is configure our vCenter server plugin. These 3 plugins here come by default with VCO 5.5. And in order to add our vCenter into, basically this is what's going to go out and register VCO as an extension inside our vCenter instance. It's again a pretty simple thing. Just the FQDN of your vCenter and some credentials to connect to that. If I can type it properly.
So, Mike, while you're filling that out, we actually have a couple of questions.
Perfect.
First one is actually, I think, a comment from Stacy Carter. You can log into the VCO appliance as root and then do your NTP settings there that way. Thank you, Stacy, for that. And then also Rob Nelson has a question. This is when talking about the database in production, he assumes you mean at scale. Are there any accurate guidelines for sizing VCO? For example, if I'm going to have this many workflows, managing this many virtual machines, how much RAM, how much storage, how many vCPUs, and things like that should I consider about sizing?
Yeah, that I'm not too sure. I've never seen a sizing guide or anything for VCO, but I know York mentioned during the last vBrownbag, I think each appliance is good for 300 concurrent workflows, I believe he said. So that's quite a bit of scale just with one. But Yeah, I'm not sure right offhand, if it matters whether you use the embedded database or an external one for scale. I don't know if anyone else knows.
Yeah, if anybody either on the Twitterverse or on the phone knows anything about scaling, feel free to chime in. Until then, we'll just keep on rolling.
Yeah, I mean, I run at the most maybe 2 workflows concurrently in our production, so, but I mean, I use an external MS SQL database there, but we're not very big, heavy VCO users, so. All right, so we'll just keep going, I guess, and watch Twitter. So when connecting to that vCenter server, we have a couple of session options here. So certainly we could say a session per user, which would basically take the currently logged in user, like whoever authenticates to vCenter Orchestrator, and create a session for that user when going back to your vCenter server. Or there's share a unique session as well. For the most part, I always use share a unique session. I believe session per user might be a bit more secure, but again, that's not something I'm worried about. So we can go ahead and apply that. And this is where things get a little bit unpredictable. So that is done, and at this point, we are done basically with this configuration page for the integration to the web client. We can come back here to our web client, and when I said things get a little bit unpredictable, is that sorry, I am not done. Need to actually restart. Actually, I don't know if I do. I might as well do it anyways. Show everyone. Need to actually restart the VCO server at this point. So through startup options, here's where we can restart, stop, and start our services. We need to do this every time you install a plugin. You'll see, and we'll see later, where it says you need to restart the VCO server in order for this plugin to install, or something along those lines. So it was actually pretty quick, so I'm wondering if it even worked. But anyways, when I say unpredictable here, on your home screen, your web client, you'll see this little vCenter Orchestrator section. Now, I've seen times after I've gone through this that all of a sudden my VCO server will be listed here. And it'll already be populated within here. Sometimes I need to log in, and I can try that, I guess, log in and log back out of the web client for it to show up, and sometimes I need to just add it in there manually. So I don't know if I'm doing anything wrong, but this environment certainly it's been registered and unregistered so many times as an extension in vCenter that it's I pretty much need to add it manually every time. But I have done installs where it just shows up. So
Yeah, if you go over the process to add it manually, I'd appreciate that, since I've had my own disappear on me.
yeah, and even adding it manually sometimes doesn't work. And I've just noticed sometimes I need to restart SSO, sometimes I need to restart the web client service, and sometimes I need to restart the whole Orchestrator server. So certainly we're going to have to do it manually here. So it'll be under the Manage tab of your Orchestrator server here. You just go edit configuration in order to get this thing in manually. And you can just type in the FQDN, actually test connection. And hopefully that comes in there. There, perfect. So now our VCO server is showing up as a registered extension inside of our vSphere web client. We can see, we can go through and we can look at the different workflows that have come across with that instance of VCO. So there's a lot of useful default workflows that come with VCO. There's some different ones I use, like removing snapshots that are older than X number of days, and you can schedule them to run once a week or once a month or something like that. You can do all this stuff within the VCO client as well, but I find it's a lot nicer. You're already in that web client to get some of these up and going right away without having to flip over to that to the Java client.
And Mike, real quick, Dan found some sizing or deployment guidelines that he wanted to share. First of all,
Sure.
The default Orchestrator appliance database configuration is suitable for small to medium scale environments, but there's no empirical data like how many hosts or how many workflows that means. And then also, if you're going to use the Orchestrator appliance in a production environment, you must set up a new database. So I guess those are two key things to keep in mind. Thanks, Dan.
Okay. Perfect. Just let me have a look at my notes over here. All right, so we're registered there now. What I wanted to go over next was just the PowerShell plugin. This was one of the biggest sort of drivers for us adopting vCenter Orchestrator. Was we had a whole library of PowerCLI scripts. Well, I had them, and I had a lot of work to do one summer, and a lot of the guys that I was getting to help, weren't comfortable with going and executing a script, but they were comfortable within the vSphere web client. So what we did was we built workflows that basically just executed our PowerCLI scripts, and they were able to help out, by going through the web client, right-clicking on a host and executing a script against it. So we'll just go over the installation of that plugin. Plugin installation in VCO, it's pretty simple. You can remember that I mentioned the VCO admin groups. You need a user that's a member of that group that you selected. Their credentials need to be in here, and basically you just upload a DAR file and install it. So I have one here somewhere. That's the PowerShell plugin there. So we just go upload and install. And all these plugins on solutionexchange.vmware.com is where you can go and download all these plugins. And there's a ton of them for REST APIs and SOAP plugins, SQL plugins, different things like that. And there's some third-party ones as well, like InfoBlocks, and EMC has a couple up there as well. So we can see there it says will perform installation at next server startup. So again, we'll have to go back to startup options and restart this. So it took a lot longer that time. Okay, the Orchestrator client. This is what it looks like, basically. This will install with vCenter 5.5. We'll just log in, and you know what? That's probably not going to work because usually you have to wait a few seconds before or after you restart that service before you can get in. See Jonathan asking about VCO configuring itself, and I think 5.5 has some workflows around that are based on VCO to configure itself. We'll have a look, but I remember seeing something in there. All right, so here we go. So a tip. This is basically our VCO client. A tip for any newbies: when I was first doing my first workflow, I was in this tab a lot, right? Which basically it's where we see all the workflows that exist within VCO. So all those ones we've seen within the web client, this is where they come from. And my Google Foo kept pointing me to, create actions and drag different actions into the workflow, which there was no actions tab here at all. If you switch to design, it works a lot better. We'll actually get all the different actions that exist within VCO as well. So just something to be aware of. It could be just me, but. So the one we're going to focus on is PowerShell, and we can see here there's a lot of sample, well, not a lot, but there's some sample workflows that come with the PowerShell plugin. So things like invoke an external script. This is the main one we'll use, but there's also some configuration ones as well. The biggest one here being, add a PowerShell host. The way the PowerShell plugin works is you actually have to point it to a PowerShell host, and a PowerShell host is basically a Windows instance that is going to execute that PowerShell script for you. So before we can actually add a PowerShell host, we need to configure Kerberos authentication on both VCO and the PowerShell host that we want to use. Now I'm just going to use the same server that I'm on here, the Windows server, the vCenter server. And I'm going to cheat a bit because there's a few commands here that we need to run. So these will be run on whatever Windows box you want to run your PowerShell scripts on. So the first thing, you just set up WinRM. And you guys may have different ways of doing this, but this is the quickest way I've found to get everything going. Next, we'll just enable Kerberos, and this is. I don't think my quotes are right in that. Yeah, there we go. So next we'll enable Kerberos in that instance. Just allow unencrypted data to transfer between the two. And then we'll just up the max memory per shell here. So that's all we need to do on the PowerShell host or whichever Windows server you want to use as your PowerShell host. In VCO, we have to do a little bit of work. And yeah, I guess you could just configure NTP right here. For to that earlier question anyways. Okay, so for Kerberos though, we need to create what's called a care-b5.conf file on our VCO server. So just noted there in VCO 5.1, this file, you needed to create it in op vmo jre lib security. 5.5, they completely moved it. It needs to be in usr java jre VMware lib security. So we'll just get there.
And this is the requirement of the PowerShell plugin, right?
Yeah, this is to get the Kerberos authentication in order to add that PowerShell host and get the authentication down so it can go and execute those scripts.
Oh, and Mike, we got a question on Twitter. Where can folks get a copy of your setup scripts, such as the Kerberos text file, if you're interested in sharing that?
Yeah, you can definitely. I can give them to you guys if you want to post them. There's a post on my blog recently about how it's changed from 5.1 to 5.5, so all the commands are there, and then the other one on my blog, which is called my First Vco Workflow. It's got all the information about getting everything we've done here set up on 5.1, and some extra stuff with the SQL plugin and whatnot. But
sure, if everything's documented on your blog, just forward me the links, and I'll make sure that when the replay goes up, we have it posted on professionalvmware.com.
Perfect. Sounds good. So this file needs to contain, this realm information here. It's case sensitive for the most part. That from what I've noticed, and one line, this KDC as well. I just did some testing today, and you don't actually have to point it right directly to a domain controller. You can just set it to lab.local for your domain to get proper failover if one of your DCs is down. So, but certainly replace lab.local with whatever your guys' domain is. And then we just chmod that to 644. And we are done. So we can get out of here. So that's the Kerberos setup. So now we can go back and finally add that PowerShell host. Now I'm going to do this right now. What this is going to do is take whatever host I set up and add it to my inventory in VCO. That way I can use it in other workflows. All of the PowerShell workflows, like invoke an external script, they're all require a PowerShell host. So they say, what host do you want me to do this on? Now you can create your PowerShell host in code every time if you want to, or I just find it easier to add it to your inventory. Then you can reuse it. And so there's our WinRM here. Authentication, we're going to switch to Kerberos. Again, I'm going to use a shared session and go ahead and add that host. So as it's going through this workflow, you can see this workflow actually has some other workflows embedded in it. There's an action called add PowerShell host. We can see everything execute and see where everything is to sort of monitor the progress of everything. That shouldn't take too long, and there's our little green check mark saying it was successful. And there's basically our logs, and you can see what the variables were that it used and what values they had. I mentioned the inventory. Here's our inventory tab here. So I'm just going to click on this now, otherwise it's going to take a long time later. But this is where all our inventory items are shown. So when that PowerShell expands, we'll see that host that we just added. So while that's doing that, there we go. I'll just go to here. So I have a couple of scripts here. The first one I'm going to execute is just called get host, just to kind of test the connection, and we'll make sure that runs. Basically, it's just going to return the information about the PowerShell instance on this box. So we can go back and we'll just use the invoke an external script workflow. Go ahead and say start workflow. There's where it's saying, okay, which PowerShell host do you want me to run this on? I'm going to run this on c.lab.local. And what's the script called? So there we can see the whatever was returned on the console in our logs here. So we know we're connected to the web client now. We know that we can run a PowerShell script on whatever host we set up as a PowerShell host. So we can make it a bit more difficult and maybe build a workflow to run this one here. So rename VMs, I think, is the one I was going to do. So this script, basically, you can see, takes a couple of parameters, takes a host and a prefix, and basically just says, get me all the VMs on that host, and for each VM, let's rename it, and this time it'll start with whatever prefix we pass it. So we can build a workflow to, sorry?
Sorry to cut you off, but I have a couple questions that just came into the chat window.
Good.
The first one is from Kellen, and he says, can you use the VMware SSO domain for Kerberos setup if you don't have AD in your lab?
I've never tried it. I have no idea. Yeah.
Okay, we'll have to hunt that one down. And then the next question is from Dan. Does the shared session account need to be a local administrator on the PowerShell host in your Kerberos setup?
Mine is, yeah. It needs whatever permissions you would need to perform PowerShell remoting and different things like that. So if you can do that without being a local admin on the box, then it should work.
Okay, so maybe some kind of superpower user that's not quite an administrator or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, the one I use is always in as a local admin on just those servers, but
okay, that's it.
Okay. So, I mean, this is a simple little script. You know, the one that got us into VCO was obviously quite longer. It configured a whole host for us. So, but you can imagine everybody's got the big library of PowerShell scripts that they're running against their environment. So, you can imagine it's probably a bit easier to maybe execute some of those things right from within the vSphere client, rather than, you know, worry about passing the correct parameters and different things like that to them. So what we'll do is we'll just build a workflow, you know, kind of to mimic this that just calls this script. All of this stuff we could do just with default workflows that are in VCO right now, but just to show the integration between, you know, PowerShell and VCO, we'll build a workflow that, you know, gets a VM host, gets a prefix from the user, and then just calls this script. So the first thing I always do, you know, add a folder, keep them separate from all the other stuff that's there, and then we'll just say new flow, and all VMs on host. So the first thing we see once we create a new workflow is we see attributes down here. Kind of hard to see, but and I almost think of attributes almost as constants or different variables, you know, that are needed throughout the workflow that you know, don't require any user input. Input parameters. This is where we're going to get information from the end user or from whoever's executing the workflow. And again, we have outputs, schema. This is where we actually build, graphically build our workflow. Presentation, we can do different things to our input parameters. Set different default values, create lookup lists, things like that. The rest of the stuff, I just kind of ignore. So from the script, we could tell, we need to get the VM host, which is, the host that we want to execute this on. It's not going to be a type string. We have access to the whole, vSphere SDK here. So this is going to actually be, and we can search everything here. We're going to make this a type VC host system. That way we have access to all the functions and properties that a host has within the SDK. And the other thing we needed was a prefix. And we'll just leave that as type string. So basically, if we run this, we can see now we need to select a VM host from our environment here and type in a prefix. We'll just cancel that now. So remember we ran that workflow that was called invoke an external script. We're going to embed that whole workflow right inside our workflow now. So we'll just drag it in there. Now, one thing to note, any sort of nested workflow or nested action or anything you have here will have its own. If we hit edit here, it has its own inputs and outputs. And so does your overall workflow has its own inputs and outputs as well. So when we do this, you'll see, do you want to add the activities parameters, to the current workflow? So what this allows us to do is take, if we had parameters set up on our workflow, it allows us to pass them inside to those sub-workflows. So when I look at something like host, this is actually the PowerShell host that we're going to use. We don't need to input that, right? We'll just go ahead and we'll set a value for that. So we could just go ahead and say, this workflow is always going to execute on this PowerShell host. Same with the external script. It's going to be set the value. This workflow is always going to run the rename vms.ps1 script. And as for arguments, we did have to pass it. If you remember on the thing, a VM host and a prefix. So I usually just go ahead and set this to a value of nothing, and just promote everything, because we're going to have to build that argument string before we pass it into this workflow, because we'll have two separate input parameters here, a host and a prefix. So we'll need to combine those two and pass it on to the invoke an external script. And the way to do that is we can just put a generic scriptable task in before this. And we'll go ahead and you see here's our in-out variables again. And we'll just bring some in. So we want the prefix, the host, and the arguments, because we're going to want to create that. So we'll just select those. There is a visual binding tab, which might make it a bit easier to see, how things are working. Oh wait, we did this wrong. We're going to want to out the arguments. So we could have just drug this down here as well, the mouse, if we wanted to. So in the scripting tab, this is where, knowing a little bit of code or knowing a little bit of JavaScript might come in handy. Just the basic stuff. JavaScript's not that hard, so. And they make it easy enough, right? You can click on arguments if you want to use arguments. So we're just going to say arguments equals vmhost.name. I know .name is a property. And we'll just say plus a space plus prefix. So what that's going to do is just kind of give us a string variable of the parameters we need to pass through to that PowerShell script in the way PowerShell wants them. I mean, that's all we had to do for this. So at this point, this workflow is ready to go. This is new in VCO 5.5. We have the run and the debug. It's nice being able to run them right from inside this workflow. You used to have to go save and close and then increment the version and then actually run it. So we can go ahead and run this. We'll just run it on host 1. So we'll just select that as our host that we want to run the workflow on, and for prefix, let's just say host 1 dash. So we can submit that, and we'll see it go through its the workflow. And if we flip over to client, we should actually be able to see it executing here as well. Yeah, so we can see the rename all VMs on a host. That workflow's running, and we can see that happening within our tasks in vCenter as well. Just have a look at. So these should start getting renamed. There we go. So it just went through host 1 and just ran that script, which basically renamed all of our VMs. It's still running, so it might still be trying to pass information back. Go ahead and save and close this. So that's all said and great, right? We can execute those workflows within the client, but really there it just finished. Where the real magic comes in is that I find is being able to execute that contextually. Like say I right click on host 2. Once we have VCO attached, once this menu is done building, we'll see all vCenter Orchestrator actions. And we can see there's a couple of defaults which are already associated to a host. So mass migrate virtual machines with vMotion, move virtual machines to another vCenter server. So what I want to do now is just add our workflow into this list, so we can just right-click on a host and run that rename VMs right from within the web client. And that is done back here again in our Orchestrator configuration. So just vCO home, and if we go look at context actions, we'll see there's those 2 that are associated to a host. You can associate them to more than one inventory object within vSphere. We're just going to do one for now, but we can go ahead and we can add it here. So I mean this is pretty simple stuff. You just go through, grab your workflow, move it over, and then say, okay, what do I want to be able to execute this on? We'll be able to execute this on a host. Just hit OK. Now we can go ahead and right-click on host 2. And now we see our workflows listed there. So first time you do this, like I said, this is a good thing too. It's gonna basically create that single sign-on token. So you're gonna want to go ahead and improve that. It shouldn't ask that again after, but you can see when we do it through the web client, we don't have to go through and select that host, right? We set that up so it automatically just selects whatever host we had right-clicked on. So we don't have to go through those crazy lists, and we'll just throw our prefix in, get the option to run it now, or we can schedule it to run once a week. So we'll run it right now. And we see it again come up in our tasks over in VCO. We'll see it's running there as well, and you can go through here and kind of see the status of it as well. Eventually that will complete.
Just a reminder, everyone, as we're waiting for the workflow to continue, we're keeping track of questions in the chat window. Feel free to ask. Oh, here we go. We have a couple ones right here. Okay, from Rob Nelson. When running workflows, is it using the user rights or the user in the shared session config? For example, can a user use a delete VM workflow even if they don't have the delete rights?
I think it will use. Actually, you know what? I can't really answer that. I have no idea. I think it would use the user that's in the shared session, but again, I can't really. I can't say for sure.
Okay. All right. We'll have to table that one for later as well.
Yeah.
And then the second question is from Sean, and he's asking, when can he buy your VCO book?
There's only one VCO book, and that's Cody's.
All right, cool. But you do have a book, and before we sign off tonight, we want to make sure that we do talk it up and congratulate you again on the vSphere storage troubleshoot book.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Now, we're coming up to 5 minutes at the top of the hour. Just wanted to make sure you're aware of the time so that we don't go over your schedule or anything. Is there much more to show?
You know what, that is basically all I had. That workflow's done, so I mean, I think, yeah, just a screen, and there's Cody's book. So basically just a screen full of resources that you can use, and VCO's got a nice little community, so they're pretty helpful on Twitter when you have questions. But yeah, that's... Sorry?
Sorry, the VCO team, they're pretty active on Twitter, I was about to say.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all I had basically for tonight. So, I mean, it's a small little PowerShell script that we executed, but you can imagine everybody probably has, great big long scripts that might be nice to, integrate into the web client like that, or even move into some other plugins. Like when you think about deploying a VM, there may be some PowerShell stuff you want to do to it. You may want to use the REST API plugin to, add it to a Veeam backup job or different things like that. So I know we've explored, using SSH if we need to do things like exclude it from a Linux proxy or different things like that we have set up. So it's pretty powerful once you get once you start touching a lot of things in the infrastructure. So
Well, sounds good. You made it look a lot easier than I expected. So thank you for that, Mike. So just before we go, can you spend just a few minutes talking about your vSphere storage troubleshooting book, so that folks can get an idea of what it's about?
Sure. Yeah, it's not an overly long book. I tried to take, the take on it of just kind of writing, what a vSphere admin would need to know to troubleshoot storage in their environment. So I think it's 150 pages. It kind of just touches on the different types of storage like NFS and iSCSI, Fiber Channel, and then just goes through, things like what to do when you're experiencing contention, capacity issues, and visibility issues, basically, when you can't see your data stores. So, yeah, it's available. I think it's on Amazon, both Amazon.ca and Amazon.com, as well as Packet's website as well. So.
All right, cool. And we actually have a couple more questions coming in about VCO. So first from Stacy, have you ever seen where the remove old snapshots workflow triggers a needs consolidation status for VMs?
I haven't, no. We've had that scheduled to runs once a month, and I've never seen that, no.
Okay, so Stacy, maybe you want to message Mike offline and follow up with him if you're seeing that with your workflows. And what is the name of the book again? Okay, so this is a question from Brandon. So there's two books that were highlighted. First, the VCO book from Cody Bunch, and then there's also, Automating vSphere with VMware vCenter Orchestrator. Even though it's not on 5.5, a lot of the concepts, a lot of the commands and point and click stuff is still applicable. And then the second book we mentioned is Mike's own book, where it's, I'll let you give the title and the publisher, Mike. I don't want to mess it up.
No problem. It's Troubleshooting vSphere Storage, and it's by Packet Publishing. So.
Okay. Oh, we have Rob chiming in, and this is probably the last comment we'll take for tonight. Rob says that yes, he has seen the consolidation issue. He saw when he was testing the snapshot plugin over and over, it may be related to the frequency of snapshots. So Stacy, that's something to check out if you're continuing to see that with your workflows. Okay, so that's it for tonight, everyone. Thank you again, Mike, for kicking off the new year in style with the VCO intro and walkthrough, making it seem a lot easier than people might be intimidated about it. So thank you again. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll catch you next week.
All right, thanks a lot.